So we back on this Diddy situation. Uh, they giving supposedly giving details. You know what I'm saying? You know how they always give titles like they gonna do it. You never heard the details. You hear the same thing. You don't learn nothing new. You know what I'm saying? So that's that's what I'm hoping is not. But man, you never know with these clickbaiters, man. uh, but yeah, man. So cue the intro. Yeah. So like I said, y'all know we don't like to do too much talking. We don't waste too much time over here. We gonna jump right into it. So, oh yeah, and before we start this, go check that Jaguar Right video out, man. If you ain't checked it out yet, go hit it up and watch it, man. Send it up, and then come back to this one and send it up. All right, let's do it.
And he subjected victims to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse so that they would participate in the freak-offs.
The freak-off, a term that has now not only become synonymous with Sean Diddy Combs, but it is at the center of his federal sex crimes case. We're going to explain some of the major accusations and details surrounding the freak-offs and what this could mean for the indicted rapper. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber.
Y'all think they really gonna give details, or we just gonna learn?
There is
the same
one
thing we already
term
knew?
that has gone viral since the indictment of Sean Diddy Combs, more than anything else. You've heard it here on Sidebar, you've heard it amplified in the media. It is called a freak-off. This alleged sexual performance that is at the center of this criminal case facing the rapper and producer Sean Diddy Combs. And I'm going to go over some of the details of these freak-off sessions as laid out in the government's indictment and in their subsequent letters that they filed with the court when they argued against Combs' bail, which, by the way, was denied twice. Now, he's currently locked up in the Brooklyn Detention Center. Combs is facing charges of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, transportation to engage in prostitution. We've mentioned it before, but he could be looking at 15 years to life in prison. That's how serious these charges are. But the main theme here, the main allegation.
They trying to hang him. Woo! Because I know they're going to try to give him life, right? Because they're going to feel like he's going to get out and do the same thing. I got to hear listen to the details.
That Combs
I got to hear the
led a
details, gang.
criminal
I got to hear the
enterprise.
details.
And the goal of this criminal enterprise, other than to operate a global media and entertainment business, was to engage in the abuse of women, sex trafficking, forced labor, prostitution, the distribution of drugs, to use violence and threats, to commit crimes like kidnapping, arson, bribery, obstruction of justice, to carry out their goals, their missions, all the while making sure to satisfy the sexual desires of Sean Combs. And one of those desires, as alleged by the government, by prosecutors, and also alleged by several Combs accusers in separate civil lawsuits that they filed against him, were the commission of freak-offs. So with that in mind, now we're going to get into these shocking details surrounding these freak-offs. And I guess we should start with saying, what are freak-offs, right?
Real quick. And y'all know they started in the 90s. I just want to say, everybody in the 90s was freaky, bro. Straight up. That's how all of us was born, bro. Well, us 90s babies, you know. That's how all of us was born, bro. All our parents is going crazy. Listen to the music. Look at the movies. Look at the shows. Fuck Freaknik. Like, everything about the 90s was freaky. Or you either freaky shit or some gang banging shit. Or the crack epidemic. Straight up, like this is one of three things. Like, the 90s was something. What the fuck you talking about?
Right, well, let's go to the indictment. It
Everybody.
says, quote, Combs and other members and associates of the Combs enterprise wielded the power and prestige of Combs' role at the Combs business to intimidate, threaten, and lure female victims into Combs' orbit, often under the pretense of a romantic relationship. Combs then used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause victims to engage in extended sex acts with male commercial sex workers that Combs referred to as, among other things, freak-offs. Freak-offs were elaborate and produced sex performances that Combs arranged, directed, pleasured himself during, and often electronically recorded. Now, while this indictment came down, I said at the time, this may be a term that is foreign to any person that was not familiar with Sean Combs, but for me, who's been following this whole saga for, a year now, I have heard this term multiple times, because in the Cassandra Ventura lawsuit, Combs' ex-girlfriend, and Rodney Little Rod Jones lawsuit, this is Combs' former producer, they discussed the freak-offs in their sexual assault lawsuits. Now, Ventura alleged, among other things, that Combs would demand her participation in freak-offs and that she would have to be forced to hire the male sex workers and that this could happen at any random moment. Jones alleged, among other things, that Combs' son Justin Combs and DJ and record producer Stevie J would engage in freak-offs. Now, to be clear, those specific allegations, those names, those details were not mentioned as part of the criminal case. I will tell you, though, that the idea of this freak-off, now that it is officially part of the criminal case, now that it's mentioned multiple times, this makes me wonder two things from a legal point of view. Number one, it is such a wild concept and a phraseology that it's hard to believe that this is something that was just made up by Combs' accusers. And when I say Combs' accusers, could that be Ventura? Yes. Could that be Jones? Yes. Perhaps the government got this information, this idea of the freak-offs originally from them. And by the way, when I say Combs' accusers, could be Ventura, could be Jones. Perhaps the government got this idea of the freak-offs from them originally, but we don't know. To be clear, we do not know for sure. We do not know who the accusers are, the victims are in this criminal case, who the government's witnesses are, whoever those people may be, because we don't know for sure who is cooperating with the government right now. But the bottom line is the idea of the freak-off, there's enough there to substantiate it that the government is moving forward with this. And again, it is so wild. It's such a wild concept to come up with that I wonder if an argument will be made that, look, jury, this has to be true. No one can honestly make something like this up. And as you'll see, it doesn't appear it was just witness testimony that corroborates the idea of the freak-offs happening, the existence of these freak-offs, but there's more, and I'll get to that. But this also leads me to a secondary point, that based upon what we are already seeing from Combs' defense counsel during bail arguments, they may not deny that these freak-offs happened, or even that Combs called them freak-offs. They may say, yeah, you know what, he engaged in freak-offs. That's what he called them. But they were consensual. Mm-hmm. That's the idea. They were consensual. This is not a crime.
And I bet you everybody signed the NDA. If you sign the NDA, you basically consenting to it. Like, yeah.
Talking about Sean Combs and these allegations, does it not show you just how scary the world can be, how unpredictable the world can be? And you know what? You know what one of the most unpredictable things can be in life? Something that is truly terrifying, that comes out of nowhere? If you get injured, right? That comes out of nowhere. But it's important to realize that at those moments, what your rights are, and whether you can be compensated for your injury. Well, that's where our sponsor and proud partner of Sidebar, Morgan & Morgan, comes in. This is America's largest track record, $1 million, and then the highest insurance. Why not start totally injured? You can easily start a claim at the comments. And I want to explore Let's explore a little bit more details of these.
Let's talk about if he touched kids or some weird shit like that. You know what I'm saying? These are adults, bro, that kept going back. Y'all went back 3-4 times, bro. I mean, that's technically not a crime. Like, yeah.
These freak-offs. So the indictment continues, quote, freak-offs occurred regularly, sometimes lasted multiple days, and often involved multiple commercial sex workers. During freak-offs, Combs distributed a
How
variety
y'all
of
get to
controlled
his house
substances to victims, in
for the
part to keep the
freak-offs?
victims obedient and compliant. Sometimes, unbeknownst to the victims, Combs kept videos he filmed of victims engaging in sex acts with commercial sex workers. After freak-offs, Combs and the victims typically received IV fluids to recover from the physical exertion and drug use. That is something, and the government would allege that
That's
these
crazy.
freak-offs, they have been happening since 2009, that those drugs consisted of ketamine, GHB, ecstasy. Now, in terms of the defense of consent, the defense could say, well, these people knowingly and voluntarily took drugs, but if it's true that Combs kept videos that these participants didn't know about, that could be problematic for him, especially since we learned the government may have the goods to back all of this up. In their bail letter to the judge, they write, quote, "The evidence against the defendant, which would be made public at trial, includes substantial evidence that is highly sensitive and has the potential to significantly and negatively impact the defendant's reputation. For example, dozens of video recordings created by the defendant of freak-offs with victims." I mean, we wondered what was collected by federal authorities after they raided Combs' homes in LA and Miami back in March. There were reports that they collected digital evidence. In fact, further on in the government's letter, prosecutors write, quote, "Setting aside devices seized in connection with the defendant's arrest, the government has obtained over 90 cell phones, laptops, cloud storage accounts, as well as over 30 other electronic and storage devices such as hard drives, thumb drives, cameras, and a surveillance system." The government also wrote, "Victim testimony regarding freak-offs is at times corroborated by other witness testimony, communications with the defendant and commercial sex workers, travel records, hotel records, videos of the freak-offs, and records reflecting or indicating payment." By the way, you're talking about evidence of freak-offs. Prosecutors revealed one other way that they can prove that these freak-off events happen, because in the government's bail letter, it states, "The defendant arranged freak-offs with the assistance of members and associates of the enterprise, including employees of his business, and the hotel rooms where they were staged often sustained significant damages." So the prosecution's letter goes on to state that, for example, in approximately 2012 in Manhattan, the defendant paid over $46,000 to cover damages to a penthouse hotel room following a freak-off. Yeah. Now, I imagine the government plans to produce receipts of this, some documentation or witness testimony to corroborate that account, because it'll be tough for the defense to say, why else did that hotel room sustain allegedly $46,000 worth of damages if it wasn't for this wild sexual performance event? But again, you could see why the government's putting that evidence forward to suggest that these freak-offs occurred. Now, going back to that idea of consent, this defense of...
There's an easy defense. They could just say he had a party. That's kind of an easy defense there. That's easy. He had a party.
Consent. I couple that with something else that I've been hearing. I've seen people say, why are these freak-offs a crime? Right? You might be wild sexual encounters.
That's what I want to know.
Why is this sex trafficking? Why is this racketeering? Well, as laid out in the indictment, but also this was articulated by Damian Williams, the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Here's what he had to say in a press conference after the unsealing of this indictment.
As alleged, Combs used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause victims to engage in extended sexual performances with male commercial sex workers, some of whom he transported or caused to be transported over state lines. When Combs didn't get his way, he was violent, and he subjected victims to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse so that they would participate in the freak-offs, and that Combs hit, kicked, threw objects at, and dragged victims, at times by their hair. On one occasion in March of 2016, that conduct was captured on video and later reported in the media. Specifically, Combs kicked, dragged, and threw a vase at a victim in a Los Angeles hotel when the victim was attempting to flee. As alleged, these assaults often resulted in injuries to the victims, which took days or weeks to heal. In addition to the violence, the indictment alleges that Combs threatened and coerced victims to get them to participate in the freak-offs. He used the embarrassing and sensitive recordings he made of the freak-offs as collateral against the victims.
And that's the key. It's using power, violence, threats, coercion, force to get people to participate in sexual activity. That is illegal. Sex trafficking is when you use such methods for the purposes of commercial sex, usually over state lines. Commercial sex is when money is offered for sexual services or something else of value. And one of the things that the indictment mentions is how Combs would allegedly dangle promises of career opportunities or threatening to withhold financial support to get people to do what he wanted. Now, you heard Damian Williams mention that 2016 incident. So even if you hadn't been following the Combs legal saga for the past year, everyone saw that video that was published by CNN of Combs allegedly beating Cassandra Ventura back in 2016 at the Intercontinental Hotel in LA, all while wearing a robe. This is something that Ventura alleged had happened when she filed her lawsuit back in November of 2023. But when that video was released, we all saw with our own eyes what apparently transpired. And we know Sean Combs issued an apology on Instagram 2 days after the release of that tape. But how this ties to the freak-off? Well, the allegation was the reason he was in a towel, the reason she was allegedly running away, the reason he allegedly beat her was because she was trying to escape a freak-off. And as Ventura alleged, prosecutors say Combs tried to cover up this event. In the bail letter, prosecutors write, quote, "When a member of hotel security staff intervened, the defendant attempted to offer the hotel security officer a stack of cash to ensure his silence. After the security guard refused the defendant's bribe and after coordination between the defendant and his employees, the defendant's staff contacted other members of hotel security. At the same time, staff members were in close communication with the victim of the assault as well, all in an effort to cover up the defendant's assault and to prevent the incident from being publicly disclosed. Within days of the incident, the surveillance video disappeared from the hotel's server." By the way, that brings me to another point about the freak-offs. How many people allegedly helped Combs do this? As the indictment reads, quote, "Members and associates of the Combs enterprise, including high-ranking supervisors, security staff, household staff, personal assistants, and other Combs business employees, facilitated the freak-offs by, among other things, booking hotel rooms for the freak-offs, stocking the hotel rooms in advance with the required freak-off supplies, including controlled substances, baby oil, lubricant, extra linens, and lighting, cleaning the hotel rooms after the freak-offs to try to mitigate room damage, arranging for travel for victims, commercial sex workers, and Combs to and from freak-offs, resupplying Combs with requested supplies, delivering large sums of cash to Combs to pay the commercial sex workers, and scheduling the delivery of IV fluids." In or about March 2024, during searches of Combs' residences in Miami, Florida, and Los Angeles, California, law enforcement seized various freak-off supplies, including narcotics, and more than 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricant. Wow.
That is crazy.
So assuming the government did in fact collect all of this evidence, again, I don't think there's a great defense for why someone would have that much baby oil and lubricant. So the defense will probably be like, yeah, my client engaged in these sexual sessions, but hey, that's not illegal on its face. Everyone agreed to it. It's all consensual. But here's the larger point. First, you can see how this supports the racketeering conspiracy charge that Combs faces, right? The idea that there was an agreement to create and further a criminal enterprise. Combs can't do this alone. Prosecutors need to prove he conspired with others in this criminal enterprise to break the law. So you see this alleged coordination between multiple people at his behest. But this also helps explain potential witnesses that may be working with the government. Those people that used to work for Combs, associated with Combs, help facilitate these alleged freak-offs that may now be key witnesses at a future trial. After all, what did the prosecution write in their letter to the judge? The government has conducted interviews with over 50 victims and witnesses, many of whom saw or experienced the defendant's abuse. Many of these witnesses corroborate one another, and their accounts are similarly consistent with the other types of evidence discussed below. The government only expects that number to continue to grow, given that the investigation, which is now public, is ongoing. And we did another sidebar on the potential that people will come forward or take deals to cooperate with the government. You can check it out on our Law and Crime YouTube page. But if you thought that all of that wasn't shocking enough when it comes to the freak-offs, I want to leave you with one final allegation regarding these freak-offs.
Right,
and this is
all
something the
alleged,
prosecutors
right?
mentioned in
All
their
alleged.
second letter regarding bail. So let's not forget, Combs was first denied bail by a magistrate judge. He appealed that decision to a district court judge, and that judge is supposed to review this with fresh eyes, doesn't have to provide necessarily deference to what this other judge did. So the government doubled down to show how much of a danger Sean Combs is, how he can't be trusted on the outside, how he needs to be detained pending trial. And in their second letter, they write, quote, "Indeed, since at least in or about January 2024, when the defendant was unquestionably aware of the criminal investigation, the evidence shows that he is engaged in multiple freak-offs, some involving the interstate transportation of individuals to participate, has continued to use narcotics, and has contacted multiple witnesses." So if true, the government is saying these freak-offs are not years old. They are essentially still happening. This was after he had already been sued, and after the idea of the freak-off had become publicized through those lawsuits.
People
People were talking
pay
about
some
in the
money, and be
media.
done. Shit.
And he's still allegedly engaged in this behavior? That's huge for prosecutors. And of course here, we know that Combs was denied bail again by that secondary judge. So there you have it. A full breakdown of the freak-off allegations, how they tie into the larger overall case. And to be clear, I'm sure this is not the last time we will hear this term, or we will hear more details surrounding the freak-offs. That's all we have for you right now here on Side.
Yeah, they finna hang. Yeah, they finna hang him. Yes, sir. They're going to hang Diddy. Now, let me tell you why. All these people finna come, just like R. Kelly. All these people finna come and say all of this stuff. Some is true, some not gonna be true. Some gonna be just wanting they 10 minutes of fame. Some gonna be wanting to get back in the spotlight. Some gonna be wanting money. You know what I'm saying? But we gonna see how this trial play out. I ain't pulling for nobody in this. You know what I'm saying? You know how I am. I don't, dude, you know he weird. You know what I'm saying? He is a little weird, freaky man. You know what I'm saying? He is a little weird, freaky man. So, yeah. But that's it for this one, man. Remember to go and turn that last video up, that Jaguar Right video. Go turn that up. Go turn it up, turn it up, turn it up, turn it up. And then come out to the moment and turn it up, turn it up, turn it up, turn it up, turn it up. You know what I'm saying? And I'll see y'all on the next one. And we gone. You dig?